Good morning, Athens, and welcome to Education Matters, the official voice of youth. Education Matters is sponsored by your local internet station, MEU Radio-Athens. Check it out at MEURadioAthens.com. My name is Thomas Smith, and joining me is my co-host,
Kareem Lumpkin,
and
Barnett.
Today on Education Matters, we will be discussing the Mayor's Youth Council with our guest.
I am Mayor Kelly Girtz.
But before we start today's show, Kareem will give us our words to grow on.
be more concerned with your character than your reputation. Your character is what you really are, while your reputation is merely what others think you are. By Dale Carnegie.
Okay, and thank you for that, Kareem. A few key talking points I wanted to start off with was, what exactly is the Mayor's Youth Council?
Well, I appreciate you having me here. I'm really excited to talk about this, which is going to be the second version of the Mayor's Youth Council. So I came into office as mayor in 2019, and we began the first version of the Youth Council that fall.
Yes.
But everybody might remember this crazy thing that dropped on us in March of 2020, the pandemic. So we sort of fumbled through the first version of the Youth Council in the rest of 2020, did as much as we could online, and took a couple of years really just to give our staff at Athens-Clarke County a chance to catch their breath because they were so overworked. But everybody's sort of level set now, and we're ready to go forward with having an annual Mayor's Youth Council. And so this is for 10th, 11th, and 12th graders, and it's a chance for you to do a few things. First is just get to know what is it that your local government does, because I think you talk to a lot of people on the street, not just young folks, but older folks, and they couldn't tell you the difference between what Joe Biden does as president of the United States and what I do as mayor of Athens. And so we're trying to make sure local, especially high school age folks, know here's what local government does. Second thing is really to do some service work and to say, hey, here's how I can make a difference week in, week out, and positively contribute to the Athens-Clarke County community. And really third is for us to learn from high school age students. Because I can tell you, somebody who worked with teenagers for 20 years in this town, I always learn more from them than I think they ever could have learned from me in the classroom. And it wasn't just what was popping on the radio, right?
Yeah.
It was a little bit of everything. What's going on in the community? What's your perspective as young people? And so we, as elected officials and as key management and staff people, want to know, hey, if we're going to consider some park upgrades, what do we need to be putting in those parks that we're going to expand or improve? If we're going to be considering some new trails, what should we be thinking about with those trails? If we're going to introduce some more arts or sports programming, what do we need to be putting in that programming? So we really want to hear from young folks too. So I'm really excited. We've got an application that's up online now. If you just go to accgov.com/youth council, accgov.com/youth council. It's a really short application. It'll take you no more than 10 minutes. And if you fill that out by September 4th, we're going to pick the best couple of dozen folks and go ahead and launch this. So I'm looking forward to sitting down with everybody and learning from them.
And my next key question was, what made you want to start the council up again? As you said before, it was canceled because of the pandemic before. So what specifically made you want to start it up again?
Well, what you hope for is that people start out being socially conscious and community conscious when they're young. I didn't know what local government did probably till I was in my mid-20s. I had no idea. I could have told you who my mayor was in Norfolk, Virginia. I didn't know my council person. I had no idea. And as an elected policymaker now, I want to make sure that every 10 and 15 and 18-year-old knows what local government does and how they can be involved. And, everybody who rolls around this town, spends money, owns this government. This is your government. So if you're buying a pack of gum, You know, if you're buying V-Bucks,
Yeah.
you know, you are funding the local government. Those are your dollars at work. And so we ought to hear from you. So it's really a two-way exchange. It's, you know, here's a way to learn some information, and we want to learn from you too.
Kareem, did you have any questions you wanted to ask?
What is the youth council council gonna basically do? Like, what is it? Not about, but like, what do they do in the youth council?
So you'll be meeting as a big group, and then you'll be meeting as smaller groups too. So in the big group, you're going to be learning about what local government does. You know, here's how the police department operates. Here's how solid waste operates. Here's what our leisure services department does. And then in smaller groups, contributing to some community building activities, doing some volunteer work that you want to do, because not everybody may be interested in cleaning up the streets. Not everybody may be interested in making art. So you're going to have some time to split into smaller groups to concentrate on those things that you're most interested in.
Also, is it only for like 10, 11th, and 12th graders, or is it just for like teenagers and people in that age?
Right now, it's just for folks who are those three grades: public schools, private schools, or homeschool.
Yeah.
And anything we'll do. In the future, we may expand it to younger folks as well. But again, you know, we sort of had this on the back burner for a couple of years just through COVID. So we're sort of relaunching with basically upperclassmen at the high school level.
And what kind of projects will the youth council and the mayor be working on some of their exams?
Well, some of this is going to be self-defined. So it may be council members saying, hey, I'm really interested in public art. You know, we've got a wall that's owned by the local government, you know, that's just a big blank piece of concrete right now. Wouldn't it be great if we could put a mural on that? That's just one kind of example. You know, it may be folks who want to say, listen, you know, we've got a literacy challenge in this community. We've got a lot of third graders who don't have the skills that they need. You know, let's go ahead and put a mentoring program in place where high school age students can mentor elementary school students. So I'm giving these as a couple of examples, but ultimately some of the projects are going to be selected by the students, by the youth council members.
And to piggyback off of that, what exactly was the biggest motivator behind creating the youth council?
Well, you know, I benefited so much from those 20 years I spent working every day with teenagers in this town, middle school, high school students. I learned a lot. I want our whole organization. I want every one of the 1,700 employees of the Athens-Clarke County Unified Government, from myself as mayor to the city manager, to folks who are working at the counter, learn from young people. So I think we do a better job when we have that new energy and understanding. And so I think it's going to make us a better community.
Okay, so what are the qualifications to be a part of the council? And I heard you say you're going to maybe pick a dozen or so. So what type of students are you looking, young people are you looking for?
So primarily we're looking for people who are enthusiastic. But we want people who really want to be there. This isn't something that you're coming to because, you know, your mama said get out of the house. This isn't something you're doing because your government teacher said I'm going to give you extra credit for this. We want self-motivated people, folks who want to be involved with other young people and want to be positively involved in the Athens community.
And how important is diversity to you for this council?
It's very important. And what I'm really happy about the first version that started in 2019 and went into 2020 is that we had a really wide range of folks, you know, racially, in terms of gender, certainly in terms of background, you know, even in terms of schools. You know, we had some Cedars, some Central, some Classic City kids, some private school kids. We had a few homeschool kids. And I think we had about 24 men, and that's what I'd expect now, is probably a couple dozen kids.
Academics, is that important for this? I mean, do you need all the A students, or are you willing to take some students who kind of like,
Yeah, we're very interested in students who are just enthusiastic about seeing a great Athens, you know, and that doesn't have to mean that you've got a 3.5 GPA. it just has to mean you're enthusiastic and that you express that in the application that's online. I remember many years ago, I used to supervise interns all throughout the community at nonprofits, and there were a couple of places in town that only wanted super high achieving students. And I always thought, if you're getting super high achieving students, it's almost like you're preaching to the choir. You're getting folks who already, have everything they could possibly need in terms of momentum and wind in their sails. And part of what we need to do is we need to get students who, might not quite know yet exactly what their direction is. And I think that's part of academic success. I mean, I was not academically successful as a young person until I knew what I was going to do, which is really when I was in college. High school, I just sort of muddled by. Didn't really want to be there. I enjoyed working a whole lot. I enjoyed going into work every afternoon, but I didn't enjoy spending 55 minutes in one class and then 55 minutes in another class. That just was not my thing. I wasn't academically successful until I saw, I've got some goals in life, which was initially around kind of working with families and then kind of transitioned to working with younger people. That's when I began to do well academically. And so, this may be a reason that some people begin to say, I'm going to now do well academically because I want to be a mayor, I want to be a commissioner, I want to be somebody who's going to be leisure services director or fire captain.
And with that, we want to pause for a commercial. I'm sorry, Kareem, to cut you off, but save it for when we come back after this break. We'll be right back. All right. 3, 2, 1.
Welcome back to Education Matters. My name, you're still here with Kareem Lumpkin, and joining me are my co-host,
Thomas Smith.
Elijah Barnett.
and we're still talking about the Mayor's Youth Council with Mayor Girtz. But before we start today's show, I will give us our To Your Health. Oral hygiene is the practice of keeping one's oral cavity clean and free of diseases and other problems by regular brushing of the teeth and adopting good hygiene habits. And it's important that oral hygiene can be carried out on a regular basis to enable prevention of diseases and bad breath. This has been To Your Health by Kareem. Mayor Girtz, does this, your youth council, does it have any power, legislative power? Can it give laws, not like laws, but ideas to help the community or something?
So none of our advisory groups, whether the adult ones or the youth ones, have direct legislative power, meaning they don't make laws by themselves. What it does do is it provides an avenue to power. And so you'll be able to say to the county manager and the department heads and to the commissioners and to myself, here's what I think we need to be doing about this next part that we're going to renovate, or here's what we need to spend more money on, or less money on in some cases. So it really is about influence. And, as you'll learn through life, influence really is a kind of a power. Now, I'm going to go home tonight and I'm going to suggest some things to my wife, and I'm going to have to learn to say some things to my wife in a way that she is going to agree with me. I'm going to say, hey, sweetie, we ought to go out this weekend and there's a band playing downtown. I would love to see it. I heard they're really good. It's not too late. So, you're suggesting all the positive attributes of your suggestion, right? Yeah. And you as youth council will be doing the same thing. You'll be suggesting positive attributes of what you want to see and trying to frame the conversation in a way that's going to suggest to me as mayor and to the commissioners that, hey, this is what we need to get behind. Does that help a little bit?
Yes. Why did you create the youth council? Did you just Like think because you were like a teacher, you think that like when you became mayor here, you think that would be a good idea to help help teenagers explore their ideas and their creativity?
That definitely was a piece of it. I think we all look in our professional lives to find some stuff that we just feel good about. And I would say that to anybody listening who's young, which is, it's not like you can go into your job, your work, and play every day, but you darn well need to find something in your work that you just can embrace and you can feel good about, because every job's going to have some tough stuff. And I can tell you as mayor, there's some real tough stuff about this job, but I'm always looking for some things that I can lean into and find joy in. And for me, spending some time around young folks is part of that. And then, as I mentioned earlier, I just realized we're going to be a better government if we're hearing from more of the community. And young people are a big part of the community. I mean, heck, we've got more than 13,000 students in the Clark County School District alone. That's just K through 12. It's a lot of human beings rolling around this town who've got some good ideas that we ought to be listening to.
Now I'm gonna pass the mic to Elijah and Thomas. Do you have any questions?
To piggyback off of what you were saying before about you being a teacher previously, how do you think that played a role or correlated any way to you creating the youth council?
Well, I'll tell you this about my time in the classroom in particular, because I spent about 13 years in the classroom and about 8 years in administration, and I'm now in my 5th year as mayor. What I found about young people is that they were really dedicated to hard thinking, and they also would be willing to have difficult conversations. Now, sometimes in the adult world, people will attempt to have a difficult conversation, but they will not, how do I phrase this? They won't emphasize their own listening skills, probably to the degree that they need to. And I found that young people could have really difficult conversations around race or history or economics or power, and they could bounce ideas back and forth off of each other in a way where you could tell, like, oh, everybody in this room is getting smarter and savvier and learning from the conversation. Sometimes adults come into the room and they are completely fixed, like their ideas are set in stone, and they are not setting themselves up to learn more. I'm going to be speaking to a group of UGA students this week, and one of the recommendations I'm giving them as they look at going into their professional lives is to continually be willing to learn. Life would be pretty darn boring if you got to 25 or 35 or 45 and you knew it all. Got nothing else to learn. I know it all. Well, shoot, you got nothing else to learn. Why are you even here? And that's part of the great thing that I've found about being around young people is that they bring new ideas and they positively influence each other. People talk about, my son's hanging out with some bad influences. Well, there are also a lot of good influences among other young people around town. And so this is a space where you can have some peers positively influence you and influence people who've got titles like mayor and manager.
I'm going to pass it to Elijah now for his question.
What kind of projects will they be working on?
Well, some of these are obviously going to be educational. So the group is just going to be learning about, hey, here's how a law becomes a law in local government, or here's how something gets paid for in local government. So some of it is going to be education. It's going to be fun, but you're just going to be learning about local government. The individual service projects, though, some of that is going to be self-defined, because the groups are going to say, hey, I really care about art, or I really care about the outdoors, or I really care about younger children, or I really care about animals. And those are all the kinds of things that you can be involved in local government, right? We've got a zoo. Have everybody been to Bear Hollow?
Mm-mm.
Everybody's like, no, man, you need to get to the Bear Hollow Zoo, my friend. I tell you, when my son was young, when he was like 3, 4, 5, we would go to the Bear Hollow Zoo every week. That was his thing. It wasn't a real Saturday if you hadn't been to the Bear Hollow Zoo. This is case in point right here, right? So my brother over here, he doesn't know about Bear Hollow Zoo, so this might be a chance for you to learn more about what your tax dollars are being spent on, right? Because you're going out there, you're buying soda, you're buying candy bars, right? Every time you buy that soda, every time you buy those candy bars, you're paying some sales tax. And that tax is going to take care of the bears over there and the owls.
Just
Snakes.
bears and owls.
Yeah, man. Yes. See, I love it. Right here on Education Matters. Folks are getting better informed. Man, I'm glad I showed up here today.
So going off of that as well, what do you think will be the biggest impact of the youth council if everything works out the way it will?
I think it's going to be twofold. I mean, it's going to be kind of individual youth council members who probably are going to see some things that they may want to be involved in later in life. I mean, that's really what being, in your teens and early 20s is all about is, it's almost like playing scavenger hunt in life. You're like, oh, I found something that really drives me, that motivates me, whether it's something that I'm going to turn into a job or is just going to be a cool hobby. And so I think that's going to be an enormous benefit. And I also think it's going to be an enormous benefit for us to have a formal way to spend some time with young people on a consistent basis. I go to elementary schools and high schools and university classrooms all the time. And those are great experiences, but, I see somebody for an hour or an hour and a half, and then I move on. This is going to be a chance for me to see some of the same folks and see them evolve, and for me to learn more continually over time.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir.
So I have a question. If some people on the youth council see stuff on the street, let's say they see a lot of trash
Mm-hmm.
on the street, or people on the streets with nowhere to go. Can they talk to you about it and see if you can do anything about it, that's what my question is.
So I think what you're describing is the way that community solutions get built. You recognize a problem and you recognize it's not going away on its own. It's going to take some investment from us. It's going to take some collective work. It's going to take some conversation. It might take some research. And so you bringing those observations to the youth council are exactly the kind of things that we need.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
what's the time commitment for this? How often will the students meet? How long will they meet? Being a member of the mayor and commission, you guys work a heck of a lot more than just one meeting a month. So what are you expecting in terms of time for these students?
We're asking members to be willing to commit 5 hours a week. Some of that is going to be whole group time. And some of that's going to be small group time where you're doing some service work. And some of that might even be individual service work time if you're doing some research or you're kind of building a program. You mentioned litter. I mean, you might need to spend some time looking to other communities that'll tackle their litter problem. And that research might be some of that time. But that's what we're asking for from everybody, roughly 5 hours a week.
What kind of opportunities do you think the students who participate in the youth council will be getting from this?
Well, one of the things that we talk about in community building is a phrase I'm going to use here. It's one of these sort of social psychology phrases. It's called social capital. An idea of social capital is that in a really good life, you're able to be around a bunch of different folks. And being around a bunch of different folks is going to mean you're going to learn from them, and you're going to have those connections that are going to last. And that's going to help you with the next step of your life, or maybe 5 steps on. And so my hope is that, I'm able to develop good relationships with the youth council members, and they'll develop good relationships with department heads and the county manager. And, maybe 5 years from now, you're calling me and saying, hey, Girtz, I see you're, working this job in Atlanta now. I'm finished with college. I'm looking for a position. Could I come sit down and talk to you? And I of course, would say, yeah, I would love to do that. Come on down. So these connections, or again, what what social scientists call social capital is so important. And so I think these young people being in a room together and being in a room with people who are in all these professional realms is going to be really positive, not just for right now, but long term.
And going off of that as well, like, what I'm trying to say is, how do you think social capitalism and the youth plays a role into that?
Well, here's the reality. We live in an Athens where, there are a bunch of folks with great resources, right? Who, were born with a lot of money. Maybe grandpa's already lining up a job for them. Somebody's got all their letters of recommendation already written to get into Harvard or Yale or what have you. But we've got a lot of students who are still figuring themselves out, figuring life out, and maybe don't have that money in the bank, or there's relatives who are lining things up for them. And this is a chance for folks to be uplifted and to have better opportunities. And that ultimately, I think, is what everybody wants, is for every young person in Athens to have a bunch of great opportunities and to not be really limited in those.
How does being a teacher kind of help with this? Since you've been working in the education industry, and I don't were you working in elementary, middle school?
So I spent 5 years at Coyle Middle School, and then I spent 15 years working with high school students after that.
How does that transition into your mayor and that youth council? Does that give you a benefit because you've been working with their age group, so you kind of know what not everybody's but most people might like.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, there are a couple of things that for me are helpful about having worked with young people. And one is just kind of thinking on your toes, right? When you've got 25 students in a classroom, they've all got different interests and different thoughts, come from different places, might have different opinions. I taught social studies, and so that was a kind of class where people's opinions were welcome, and their expression was right there out in the open. And so now for me, in working with adults, I'm already well versed in how to deal with people with bunches of different opinions and try and get a decision made at the end of the day, even though people come from different places. So that helps me out a whole lot. But I'll tell you the other thing that working with young people changed about the way my brain worked. Instead of just looking through my own eyes and through my own lens of experience and my own background as somebody who grew up in Norfolk, Virginia, and bounced around for a couple of years, and then ended up moving to Athens for graduate school, and then fell in love with the community. And instead of just looking through my own lens, my own eyes, I now kind of look at the world through young people's eyes too, just because I spent so much time around them. And so I'm always wondering, what's this neighborhood like as a young person? What's this experience like as a young person? If I was a young person, would I be excited about what there is to do this weekend as much as I am as a 50-something? So that's the piece that I think working with students for a long time really helped me out with now as mayor.
We'll be right back after these messages.
Good morning, Athens, and welcome back to Education Matters, the official voice of youth. Education Matters is supported by your local internet station, MEU Radio-Athens. Check it out on MEURadio-Athens.com. My name is Aiden Dowdy, and I'm here with my co-hosts,
Thomas Smith
and Kareem Lumpkin.
So, I have a question for you, Mr. Girtz. Okay. Have you ever thought about giving up, and if you did, what made you keep going?
Oh, I appreciate the question. We're in an interesting time period, right? Because for so many people, whatever thought goes through their head, they're going to put online, and you're going to see it on Twitter or TikTok. I tend not to be quite as public with every thought that I have. But I certainly have thought, well, am I doing the right thing? Am I in the right job? I've got a little more than 3 years left to be mayor. So I'll be done being mayor in December of 2026. And I am super committed to the next 3 years, but I'm also super excited that I'm going to get to do something else. And in some cities, people aren't term limited, meaning you can just keep running for the same office again and again and again. There are some mayors that have been mayors for 20 years of their towns. And for me, 8 years is a nice little package, especially because I was a county commissioner for 12 years before. So when I'm done, that'll be 20 years of local government service. That's going to feel really good. And I know it's also going to feel really good to kind of step out of that office, step out of that seat, and just do something different. But you saw a lot of mayors, especially in the pandemic, who decided, well, I'm just done being a mayor. Mayoring got really tough. People were mad at you no matter what you did. And I had a couple thoughts of like, hey, is this the right thing to do? But ultimately, I knew that I wanted to continue in the job and try and take some of the things that I'd started and then bring them to a bigger scale and continue on at least for another term.
And with you being the mayor, how do you think the youth, more specifically high school students, view your job and how it correlates directly to the laws and regulations we see and view in the community in this past few years?
Well, what is good about Athens is it's a pretty tight-knit community. I mean, not everybody agrees all the time. I mean, you can find that out in any room of people you go into, even if they're, or maybe especially if they're your family members. But people do tend to give each other some grace in Athens, and it's easy to engage with people here. And so it's an unusual week for me if I'm not in a student's classroom, either at Cedar or Central or one of the middle schools or one of the elementary schools, or certainly on the university campus. And so people, I think, once they get over the notion of, oh, I'm in a room with a mayor, just find that it's pretty easy to engage. And so I have a lot of people who come up to me on the street or in line at the grocery store, that sort of thing. And for me, that's a really fulfilling part of the job. And part of what I hope about the youth council is, that's some more folks who are going to feel engaged with local government, rather than feeling like, local government is some weird thing that's distant that doesn't have anything to do with me. I want folks to understand you own the local government. It's your local government. It's not mine. It's yours.
And more off of that as well, how do you think schools will benefit directly from the council?
Well, what I would seek is that this is sort of what they call self-perpetuating, meaning, this group this fall is going to have a good experience this academic year. And some of these folks are going to be going off to college, but they're going to tell younger siblings and neighbors and classmates like, oh man, we had a great time on the youth council. You definitely need to do that. So, these things tend to take a life of their own if you can get them rolling. And so I'm excited. I've got 3 years of youth councils ahead of me, and I hope whoever is mayor after me picks up the baton and runs with it.
So is the youth council a year-long commitment, or how many months is?
So it's basically an academic year-long commitment.
Okay, so basically it'll end in the end of May
24.
Okay, then the summer's off and do what they need to do. Okay.
That's right.
And is this a volunteer or is there a stipend tied to
This,
it?
this at least at this point is a kind of volunteer activity. There's not a stipend, sort of like a club.
Mm-hmm. In your now, I guess, 5 years of being there, what would you say has been the biggest challenge, at least in terms of youth in this community?
Certainly the COVID era was really challenging. You had more than 10,000 young people who were at home. Not all of those homes had great internet service. Not all of those homes had a refrigerator full of food. And I think we're going to be working through the challenge that created for some time. it's one thing if the pandemic hit when you were in 10th grade and you're like, well, I can read already. I've already got some direction. I've got some skills. But I think if the pandemic hit when you were 6 or 8 or 10, that was tough, because these years when you normally would have had this high level of engagement with your peers, teachers, and guidance counselor, and administrators, you were distant from them. And it's true for adults too. I mean, the thing that I've said coming out of this last couple of years is everybody got a little bit bruised. Everybody got a little bit bent out of shape. And you just don't heal from being bruised overnight. It takes a little while. And that looks different for everyone. For some people, that's academic challenges if you should have been in first and second and third grade through the pandemic. For some people, it's the emotional turmoil. When you're an older person, maybe if you lost your job or got laid off or had to move back in with your mother, it's a different kind of experience. So this era, I think, has been particularly tough on young people. I'll say, super excited because more people are coming back to the school district this year, and I hope we continue on the upswing.
I can understand that because when COVID struck, I was in second grade.
And we'll be right back after this break.
Good morning, Athens, and welcome back with Education Matters, the official voice of youth. Education Matters is sponsored by your local internet station, MEU Radio-Athens. Check it out on MEU Radio-Athens.com. I'm Aiden Dowdy, and I'm here with my co-host,
Thomas Smith.
Kareem Lumpkin.
Elijah Barnett.
So I have a tiny little question. Just a tiny.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think the council impacts kids, in your opinion?
Well, if you think about the last version, again, this was the version before the pandemic, brought a lot of kids together who just would never have met each other. That was really cool. I remember in particular one session, we were at Sandy Creek Nature Center, and our leisure services staff was getting ready to put a new playscape in, and they wanted to hear what needed to be part of that playscape. And so what was really cool is that our staff learned a lot, and I think the students walked out of there thinking, oh, I had a real impact on something that's going to get built right here in Athens because I had given some suggestions. And so that, for me, represents the power of the Youth Council.
Well, I don't know if you explained this or not, but what's the point of this?
So the biggest thing about the Youth Council is for young people to be able to say, this is my government. This belongs to me, and I've now got some understanding of it and some influence on it. And then beyond that, to be able to know, like, hey, here are some tasks and skills that I can take into whatever I'm going to do next, whether that's going to college or maybe a career. I mean, what I tell every class that I go into is that any member of this class, whether it's a second grade class or a university class, any of you could be mayor one day. It's not rocket science. It just takes some kind of basic attention and caring about the place where you live, loving the place where you live. So I hope that people come in loving Athens, and I hope they leave loving Athens even more.
Is there like when does the youth council start? And also, do you like if someone says they need, like, do you ever like have them talk about their ideas, like for Athens and stuff? You let them like if let's say there's an open space that's owned by like the mayor or whatever, like not by you but like the city.
By the county.
Mm-hmm. And nobody knows what to do there. Would you would you let them do their own creative ideas and like figure out what like should be there, and would you to actually do it or take recommendations for it?
So just to hit your questions, applications are due on September 4th. So again, if you go to accgov.com/youth council, accgov.com/ youth council by September 4th. Go ahead and sign up if you would like to be a member of the youth council. And then we're going to get organized at the end of September. So the first meeting will probably be last week of September, first week of October. And then the kind of project you're talking about, using some vacant land that's county-owned land, that's exactly the kind of thing we want to hear from youth council members. What is it we need to be thinking about we're doing a better job of as a community?
Are you going to facilitate this council, or are you going to have to?
I'm not the primary facilitator, but I'm going to be at most of the meetings. So our leisure services staff, I think it's Assistant Leisure Services Director Alex Mon, the young man who grew up here in the community. I think he's going to be the primary facilitator. But there are going to be a lot of people who cycle in and cycle out. So youth council members will be able to understand a little bit of, here's what happens with road maintenance. Here's what's going on in the courthouse. Here's what's going on in the fire department. And you can learn a lot about what's going on, again, with the tax dollars you spend every day.
And again, what age range are you looking for?
And we're looking for 10th, 11th, and 12th graders. So currently in 10th, 11th, and 12th grade.
So no sixth graders?
From any of the schools. And down the road, we may be expanding to some middle schools, but right now, since we're just getting kicked back into gear, we're going to do just 10th, 11th, and 12th.
Start off with something small and then get bigger.
That's right. That's right.
And why do you think the youth? Why do you think the youth is so able to have these difficult conversations that need to be had in order for change to be made, like the youth council of such would bring?
I think what happens is sometimes, not always, but sometimes when people go through life, they stop thinking creatively because they're now invested in the way things are. Change is difficult for human beings. And when you're young, you're more change oriented. You get used to whatever musical trend is happening this year, or whatever cultural trend is happening, or you're learning new things in school or learning new things about the world. And so you're still looking for new stuff. And so I think that's why young people tend to be open to new ideas and tend to be change agents.
And what exactly do you think, what role do you think parents play in this as well?
Well, parents are a key partner. Anybody who talks about how good community work happens, we'll talk about what they call two-generation solutions. That you want young people to get new skills, and you want young people to be able to be upwardly mobile and smarter and use their time well. But you also need their parents to be involved. Every young person who is listening to the show is going back to a household, and for that household to be really successful, you're going to talk about young folks and their families all needing to be at the table and all needing to be healthy and well motivated. If I thought about Noah, my soon-to-be 11-year-old, trying to rule the roost on his own, I think he'd struggle a little bit. The guy can make some toast, but that's about as far as it goes.
So you mentioned earlier that you got basically 3 more years in office.
That's right.
What do you hope to accomplish between now and the end of your term?
Well, learning that, in any big organization, it takes a while to get things going. There are a couple of cornerstones that I have wanted to have in place, and some of those are getting in place now, but are going to need some more attention. So we have an intergovernmental agreement we just signed with the Clark County School District to do some joint youth development planning, particularly with a violence prevention focus. I'm really excited about that, but that's just now kicking off. We also have just kicked off some formal work around creating new housing for people. And we've kicked off a process that we've learned, honestly, from West Alabama about how to connect young adults, say people coming out of high school or coming out of college, with high-wage jobs. And so all of these right now are things that are in their infancy. We've just begun to build them. And so I'm hoping by the time I'm out of office in a little more than 3 years, that those things will be off and running.
What do you hope will be your legacy?
Well, pertinent to what we're talking about here with the youth council, I hope more people feel like the government belongs to them.
And what do you think what is the process that the youth council, starting from the youth council to them pitching their ideas and opinions to you, and you taking it to the commission, how will that process go?
That's still under development. Certainly one of the things that we'll do is we'll have some regular deliveries of youth council ideas to the commission and to key staff members. And those may look, those may not look like a report at school. That may be a video. That may look differently based on the different groups of people who are in the youth council.
And what exactly what role will the commission play into this as well?
Well, so the commission has funded this, so I'm excited that they set aside the money for this. And certainly I can say, whether I agree with every member of the commission or not, I'll say they're all authentically interested in the community being involved. And we spend a lot of time lately talking about how important it is to keep young people positively engaged, and this is going to be a real avenue for positive engagement.
And what do you think made the commission want to have this youth council?
I think commissioners are like, ooh, this looks good. I'm not going to vote against this.
Something that also came out from the county government, in particular the Board of Elections, they're looking for poll workers, and you could be as young as 16 to be a poll worker. Could you speak to that and how that will help the community?
I could. I mean, there's nothing that we need more in democracy than people to get out and vote. And one of the ways that as a pretty young person, a 16-year-old, you can help is by being a poll worker. And so there's generally in Georgia now, and this has been shifting a little bit over the years, but generally now about a 3-week period of early voting and then day of voting. And next year, you're going to have 3 weeks of early voting in the party primary leading up to May, and then 3 weeks of early voting in November. And these are jobs that pay $15, $16 an hour, so it's decent money. If you can be moderately organized and you can commit, I want you to sign up to be a poll worker. We need you. Please get out there and do that.
What age do you have to be a poll worker?
16 years old and older.
Same age you have to be to drive, so just remember it like that.
Yeah, but there's a lot of value in being a poll worker, and there's really a lot of value in being a young poll worker. When I was a poll manager, I really sought the younger minds, one, because you could maintain your concentration longer, but you also knew the technology, and technology is a lot more involved in the voting process today than it used to be. So it's a great opportunity to serve the community by being a poll worker. So, and like I said, it does pay, and it's an interesting way to spend a day, but it's definitely a way to make an impact, not only on local government, but also on the national government, because next year is a presidential election, and you could help elect the next president of the United States.
Very cool, very cool. And who knows, you might enjoy that time as a poll worker and say, hey, I want to work for the government in some other capacity. Maybe you want to lead summer camps. Maybe you want to be a manager of a fire station. There are a lot of chances out there. So really excited to have some young folks involved in this community, and the Youth Council is going to be a big part of that.
All right, Kareem, essential question, please.
Mayor Girtz, why does education matter to you?
Well, education is one of those cornerstone foundations. So in the same way that if you want to build a building, you can't build it right on the dirt or right on the sand. You need a strong foundation. Education is a big piece of that foundation in your life that you're going to be drawing upon for the rest of your years.
Thank you for listening to Education Matters, the official voice of youth. Education Matters is sponsored by MEU Radio.com. If you miss any portion of the program or would like to hear it again, it can be heard Monday at 5:30 p.m. on it, or Tuesday at 10 a.m. on MEURadio-Athens.com. You can also listen on demand at YouTube channel Education Matters Network.
Bye.
Bye.